In the wake of the devastating Victorian bushfires earlier this year, the state government set up the Victorian Bushfire Recovery and Reconstruction Authority. At the time, Nixon was just finishing up as the Victorian Police Chief Commissioner. I sat down with her earlier in the week to chat about the authority's role following the fires earlier this year and its continued work as we enter into this summer's bushfire season.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us today, Nixon, from the Victorian Bushfire Reconstruction and Recovery Authority. I guess for people that the organisation itself is fairly new, obviously only being set up in the middle of February this year in response to the bushfires. Can you give us a bit of a broad overview of what the role of the organisation is?
Sure. After the bushfires, the government determined that it would first of all establish the Red Cross Bushfire Appeal, and that was in the very early days. And then it decided to establish the Royal Commission, and then believed that we should have a coordinating body for the recovery and reconstruction. Victoria has not done this previously. They've usually managed it through a large government department or working with local councils. And so because of the size of the fires, they decided to establish the Bushfire Authority and gave it, obviously asked me to be the chair. So in the first sort of while, it was just a very small number of people. But what we were doing is working with federal government, state government, local government to coordinate the plans to recover. And I suppose from the very beginning we started to work in early relief. So places like Kinglake couldn't get water, and so we were part of bringing people together and figuring out how did you do that for the whole of the communities.
Okay, now obviously you stepped into this role directly after being Victoria's Police Chief Commissioner. What were was it a big shift for you, or being at the top of an organisation, did you bring a lot of the same skill set?
Well, I think that's why the government asked me to take it on, because I was finishing in Victoria Police. I think I probably only had about 6 weeks to go before my retirement, and I had obviously been aware of the lead up to the fires and then when the fires occurred, and so the government asked me would I take the job. I didn't move straight away into it because we still had fires burning, we still had very serious sort of situation in Victoria for about a month afterwards. So I stayed with Victoria Police until the 2nd of March, and then I came into the role. So it was really one, I think, that having managed a big organisation, also because I had, many people in Victoria knew who I was, and I think had a confidence, the fact that I could do things after having achieved quite a lot with Victoria Police. I think that was what sort of underpinned why I got chosen, and then we knew really what to do. And I suppose the most important part for me was to make sure that we worked with the local communities, and I'd always been very strong about doing that in Victoria Police.
Yeah, I guess the interesting, because it's obviously recovery and reconstruction, and to me that's kind of recovery is about the human element and reconstruction is about infrastructure. So how do you straddle like the two sort of elements of that?
Look, we chose a model that is actually a New Zealand model for recovery and reconstruction, and it has at the core of it the community. So you've got to make sure that you maintain communities, you build them, they're strong, and that you think about what will keep that community together, because what we know in disasters is if the communities fall apart, then you have a much more complicated process of recovery. So the community was at the heart. We then looked at the people themselves, young people, older people, what kind of support they had, jobs. Just a lot of things were part of dealing with the individuals and families. And then we looked at the reconstruction, which was a piece of thinking about, what did you have to do first before people could even think about building homes or schools or whatever it was. And then we worked on the economy, which is all about small business. And many people who lived in these areas ran businesses from home and had small business, so we had to think about how we supported them. And of course then there was the environment. So the environment was just decimated, and millions of animals were killed, native animals, and also trees and water catchments were damaged. So what we did was we said, okay, that's the model, and now what we're going to do is work our way through each of those aspects of it, as well as dealing with donations and thousands of volunteers, those sorts of things.
I'm interested in the youth element, being a youth show.
Sure.
I guess the whole thing about bushfires, I see it, it's about community, it's about communities wanting to live where they want to live in Victoria, wanting to stay there and being able to survive bushfires. And I guess the thing is, if there's, I'm interested if there's a lot of young people living and they kind of just see that and they're going to want to get out of there. So what kind of work has to be done with young people to really make them bushfire, aware?
Okay. I think that there's two groups really. One is that those young people who were involved in the bushfires and were very keen to make sure they're supported. A lot of them just did amazingly courageous things in supporting their families. Many, who got out were just incredibly lucky to get out. So there is a very significant impact. And then there are, in some cases, they lost friends who died in the bushfires. So we need to make sure we support those people over time. That would be important. And the next part is that young people at schools and in the community need to understand the effects of bushfires and what can be done and what they can do in their own sort of house and arrangements to support their parents or family members, when there is a bushfire. So education through schools. Red Cross does some great work in schools and whether it's a Catholic or public or private school, people are, getting education information on that. But I think they need to be paying attention to all the warnings. They need to get on the internet. I mean, one of the things we found was that many of the young people, through the sort of networking, social networking pages, knew more about the bushfires than anybody else did.
Is that something you've taken on board, the fact that I guess it's an interesting thing where young people can use the technology versus a lot of people in regional areas or rural areas that just don't even have internet. No. So what's the balance there between getting information out in the different ways?
Well, we've certainly learned from young people that Twitter and Facebook and all of the sorts of ways that young people communicate were great ways for us to communicate as well. So we use those technologies. I remember one young fellow said to me at a meeting, I'm going to go home and teach Grandma how to text, because she didn't know how to do that. And I think, so we then said maybe we should set up a training course for older people in texting, because, you get a much quicker information, and I think that was part of it. So we're learning from those young people. And I remember, sadly, a father said to me, his 16-year-old son, he said, my son's become a man today because of what he had to see. And I think, the young people have just done a great job. They need to be aware. They too can be very much part of prevention in the future and also helping us in response and recovery.
Okay, moving on to, I'm interested about, I guess the fact that VBRA it's obviously set up under the government, but there's been a massive groundswell of community and grassroots action. So I'm interested about, is there a stage where VBRA kind of steps back and goes, no, the community's better at doing this?
Oh, we've done that a lot during the process. I've had a significant number of community meetings, and we established 33 community recovery committees around the state, and they made up people who are involved in the bushfires communities, and so they've been the ones telling us what they want done, and very much we're now saying to them, you just tell us what your plans are, we'll help you work through them, and we'll support you to do that, and then we'll help you in implementing those plans, and then eventually, as you said, we'll step back, but not yet. We've got 2 years as an authority from the time of the bushfires, and so we've got a fair time yet to make sure that we help those communities, and then there is a point where the communities will go on their own and hopefully be much stronger and much more able and better supported, better equipped.
So thanks so much for speaking to me.
Thank you. Nice to talk with you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.